Perhaps you have come through a long day. Your mind is still restless, thoughts not yet folded away, questions that have not found a place to rest. We live in a world that constantly urges us to understand, to explain, to control everything around us. And yet the more we try to understand, the more tired we sometimes become. This video does not come to give you more answers. It comes to gently invite you to set some of the questions down. Tonight, allow yourself to pause. There is no need to chase meaning. No need to reorganize your life. Simply listen as if you were sitting very still beneath a vast sky where everything exists without needing to be named. Within this quiet space, we will step together into a slow journey. A journey through the universe, through philosophy, and through the human mind itself. Not to understand the universe more deeply, but to feel lighter while standing before it. Because perhaps as a gentle yet difficult truth to accept, the universe was never meant to be understood. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And perhaps in this moment, as your body gradually softens and your breath grows more even, you do not need to awaken in the usual sense. You only need to be here, to listen, to drift more slowly, and to let the universe with its quiet whispers lull your mind into sleep. Perhaps one of the most hidden forms of exhaustion in modern life does not come from a lack of information, but from having too much that must be understood. We wake each day with the feeling that if we do not understand this world clearly enough, we will fall behind, make mistakes, live the wrong way. We try to understand others, understand ourselves, understand society, understand the future, even understand what lies beyond our reach. And then even when night arrives, the mind refuses to rest. It keeps asking, keeps analyzing, keeps searching for meaning. But perhaps from the very beginning, we carry within us a deeply human assumption that reality exists in order to be understood by us. The universe, when seen from a distance, does not seem to agree with that assumption. There is no sign that the laws of physics were designed to feel intuitive. There is no evidence that space-time or matter care whether we find them reasonable or not. The universe does not explain itself. It simply operates, quietly, precisely, and entirely indifferent to humanity's desire to understand. When a star collapses, it does not do so to become a symbol. When time stretches near a powerful gravitational field, it is not meant to challenge philosophy. When light bends, or when quantum particles behave as both wave and particle, no message is being sent. There is no metaphor, no accompanying explanation, only events. We are creatures evolved to survive on one very specific planet. Our brains were shaped to detect danger, seek patterns, and build stories. And because of this, we struggle to accept a reality that tells no story, favors no morality, and offers no reply to our questions. Albert Einstein acknowledged this limitation when he wrote, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." Even the understanding achieved by science exists not because the universe wishes to be understood, but because humans have learned to construct models good enough to live alongside it. Understanding in this sense is not a grasp of ultimate essence, but the creation of temporary descriptions, useful, predictive, workable, and the acceptance that they will always remain incomplete. Philosophy sensed this misalignment very early on. Stoic thinkers like Marcus Aurelius did not seek a universe that was meaningful, but one that was true to its own nature. In Meditations, he wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together." Behind this counsel lies not resignation, but a profound adjustment of expectation. Do not demand that reality conform to your cognitive desires. Learn instead to live in harmony with it, even when you do not fully understand it. In the following century, Nietzsche went further, touching on an unsettling idea that there may be no objective moral order carved into the fabric of the universe at all. In Beyond Good and Evil, he wrote, "There are no facts, only interpretations." This statement does not deny reality. It reminds us that what we call meaning is always a human creation shaped by history, culture, and psychology. The universe does not oppose this. It does not confirm it either. It simply does not participate. And it is precisely here that many people begin to feel empty. If the universe does not care, if it was not made to be easily understood, then is every search for meaning futile. Carl Jung offered a different path, gentler yet deeper. He did not seek meaning in the external structure of the universe, but in the relationship between the human being and what cannot be fully understood. In Psychological Types, he wrote, "The psyche creates reality every day. Reality is not created for us, but our experience of reality is shaped by the mind. When we stop demanding clear answers from the universe, the mind gains space to breathe. When we accept that some things lie beyond comprehension, we do not become weaker, we become quieter. Perhaps the exhaustion so many carry does not come from the universe being too complex, but from our constant effort to force it into simplicity on human terms. We want a world that is fair, predictable, with clear causes and reasonable endings. But the universe does not operate like a fairy tale. It resembles a current without malice, without kindness, simply continuing. And when this is understood, a strange kind of healing takes place. We no longer need to understand everything in order to feel at peace. We do not need to explain suffering through a greater meaning. We do not need to assign purpose to every event. Sometimes admitting I do not know becomes the doorway to stillness." In The Myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus wrote, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. He does not say that the summit holds an answer, only that living fully within absurdity is enough, and perhaps as night falls, as the light softens, and the outer world grows quiet, you do not need another theory. You only need to allow yourself to exist within a reality that does not require full understanding. The breath comes and goes. Thoughts arise and dissolve. The universe continues to operate whether you understand it or not. Not every mystery needs to be solved. Not every question needs an answer before rest is allowed. Perhaps the deepest serenity begins with accepting a simple truth. The universe was not created to be easily understood by humans, and you in this moment do not need to understand it in order to be at peace." As part 1 closed with the gentle acknowledgement that the universe was not created to be easily understood by humans, perhaps a very soft silence has begun to form within you. Not a sense of loss, but a feeling of release. Like the moment we stop trying to read a language that was never meant for us and allow ourselves to simply listen to the breath of the night. It is within this quiet that another question quietly opens, not a question of understanding, but a question of presence. If the universe was not made to be easily understood, was it made for human existence at all? And as we look more deeply into that vast picture, the answer slowly emerges, not loudly, not harshly, but honestly. The universe is not only indifferent to whether we understand it, it also continuously creates worlds that are not meant for life yet still exist perfectly according to their own logic. There are planets where rain does not fall as water, but as sharp shards of glass driven sideways by supersonic winds. There are worlds whose surfaces are so hot that metal flows like rivers. There are stars long since dead whose cores have crystallized into immense diamonds, beautiful cold and entirely useless to life. There are environments where pressure crushes all biological structures, where radiation erases every complex molecule, where the very concept of living never even has a chance to emerge. Seen through human intuition, such places seem as though they should not exist. They do not serve life. They offer no benefit. They carry no clear purpose. And yet the universe creates them anyway, without hesitation, without permission, without needing a reason. We are accustomed to viewing the world through a deeply human lens. Everything exists for something, a function, a purpose, a value. But when we stand before these extreme worlds, that lens begins to crack. For there is no evidence that the universe prioritizes life, nor is there any sign that life is the center of the story. From a distance, life appears more like a delicate accident than a carefully planned goal. Philosophy has long touched this unsettling feeling. In Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote a sentence both brief and abyssal in its implications. "The world is all that is the case. The world is not everything that holds meaning for us. It is simply everything that is happening. And within that, everything, most of it, has nothing to do with life, with morality, or with humanity." This realization can make us feel small, but it can also make us lighter. Because if the universe was not designed for us, then feeling lost, fragile, or uncertain about our place is not a personal failure. It is a natural consequence of living within a reality far larger than the human mind's capacity for psychological adaptation. We have not failed to understand the universe. We are simply standing in the rightful place of a non-central creature. Friedrich Nietzsche, often misunderstood as pessimistic, actually saw in this a form of freedom. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he wrote, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Here, chaos is not disorder to be eliminated, but the foundational truth of reality itself. A universe that produces countless worlds inhospitable to life is precisely such a chaos. And it is within that chaos that life rare and fragile becomes astonishing. When we recognize that most of the universe is uninhabitable, Earth ceases to be a standard and becomes a gentle exception, not because it was favored, but because it happens to lie within an extraordinarily narrow chain of conditions, just the right distance, just the right temperature, just the right chemistry, and just the right amount of time. The existence of worlds that seem as though they should not exist yet reveals a quiet truth. The universe has no obligation to be friendly. And for that very reason, every friendly moment we experience, air to breathe, water to drink, a body capable of rest, becomes precious in a deeply natural way without needing explanation. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." To receive reality as it is, even when it is cold, distant, and not made for us, is not surrender but a profound form of reconciliation. When we stop demanding that the universe resemble a warm home, we begin to cherish the rare corners where life can take root. Perhaps many of our anxieties arise from an unspoken belief that the world should be easier to live in, that if we try hard enough, understand enough, behave correctly enough, reality will become kind. But when we look beyond Earth, where most worlds are harsh, silent, and uninhabitable, we begin to see that harshness is not a sign of failure, it is simply nature. Albert Camus called this the absurd, the mismatch between humanity's hunger for meaning and the universe's silence. In The Myth of Sisyphus, he wrote, "The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world." Yet Camus did not end in despair. He ended in clarity. When we accept that the universe was not designed for us, we are no longer bound to the illusion that everything must have a reason. And when that illusion dissolves, a very strange peace appears. You do not need to be worthy in order to exist. You do not need to understand the universe in order to rest. You do not need to find meaning in every form of harshness. Tonight, as you lie still and listen to stories of worlds not meant for life, let your mind drift slowly. Remember that even within a cold universe filled with countless places where existence is impossible, you in this moment are breathing. And that in itself is something exceedingly rare. Perhaps healing does not come from believing that the universe cares about us. It comes from realizing that we can still care for ourselves even when the universe does not. And within that awareness, nothing more needs to be understood. Just remain in silence, in the night, and allow thoughts to slowly dissolve like distant stars existing without needing to be understood. As part 2 closed with images of worlds not meant for life, planets of glass rain, molten surfaces and spaces entirely indifferent to biological existence, perhaps a familiar feeling has begun to stir within you. Not exactly fear, but disorientation. A gentle disorientation, like realizing that the room you are standing in was never designed for your height, nor does it care whether you bump your head or not. And from that feeling, another question quietly emerges, more subtle, more intimate. If the universe was not designed for life, then was it designed for the way we understand it? Once again, the answer is no. Physics, the deepest language humans have ever constructed to describe reality, does not care about our intuition. It does not try to be reasonable in everyday terms. It does not explain itself through familiar images. It simply describes what happens even when what happens runs entirely counter to the way the human brain experiences the world. We grow up within a 3-dimensional space where time flows evenly, where stillness means stillness and motion means motion. Our intuition is shaped in this environment for survival, to distinguish near from far before, from after fast, from slow danger from safety. But when we leave that familiar scale, when we enter the realm of light speed, of extreme gravity, of subatomic particles, that intuition begins to betray us. Time, which we once believed to be the most stable of all flows, suddenly becomes elastic. A clock in motion runs more slowly. A person standing near a massive gravitational field ages more slowly than one farther away. Not metaphorically, physically, with exact precision. This is not illogical to the universe. It is only illogical to the human brain. Space, too, is no longer a flat stage. It curves, it bends, It stretches under the influence of mass and energy. Objects are not pulled in the way we imagine, but move along curved paths within the fabric of space-time. Yet our minds, trained on flat ground and the arc of thrown stones, were never built to picture this. Albert Einstein once acknowledged this gap between intuition and reality when he wrote, "Common sense is nothing more than a deposit of prejudices laid down in the mind before you reach 18. What we call common sense is merely a collection of perceptual habits that help us survive within a very narrow niche of the universe. It is useful, but it is not ultimate truth." Quantum physics goes even further in challenging intuition. A particle can exist in multiple states at once. A measurement can alter the outcome. Two particles can remain linked across distance as though space itself does not lie between them. To human intuition, this sounds like magic. To the equations, it is perfectly valid. The problem is not that the universe is irrational. The problem is that our intuition is too local. Philosophy has long recognized this limitation. Immanuel Kant argued that space and time are not properties of the world in itself, but cognitive frameworks imposed by the human mind upon experience. In Critique of Pure Reason, he wrote, "We have no knowledge of things as they are in themselves, but only as they appear to us." This does not make the world unreal. It simply reminds us that what we perceive is always a meeting point between reality and the structure of the mind. When physics moves beyond the reach of intuition, a sense of disorientation is inevitable. Yet perhaps that very feeling, no longer being able to cling to common sense, holds a strangely healing potential. For much of human anxiety arises from the belief that if something feels unreasonable, then something must be wrong. We apply intuitive standards to everything. Emotions must make sense, life must make sense, pain must have a clear cause. But the universe offers a different lesson. Many things are true without being easy to understand. Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "In fear and trembling, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Some things become understandable only when we stop demanding immediate clarity. And some things never become intuitive at all, yet remain true in their own way. When we accept that physics does not care about intuition, an invisible pressure begins to dissolve. We no longer need to force ourselves to make sense of every experience. We do not need to turn every paradox into a comforting story. We can remain with ambiguity just as physicists remain with equations that are non-intuitive yet precise. Carl Jung called this state the capacity to tolerate uncertainty. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he wrote, "The intellect is only one among several fundamental psychic functions, and therefore does not suffice to give a complete picture of the world." When intellect is no longer the sole instrument, we allow sensation and a deeper intuition, not survival-based intuition, but existential intuition, to speak. An intuition that does not try to understand, but simply observes. Perhaps at night, as light fades and the pace of life slows, the mind is quietly recalibrating itself. It temporarily withdraws from the need to control. It loosens its grip on familiar models. Like the universe on a larger scale, it allows the unreasonable to coexist without demanding immediate reconciliation. And in that moment, a very gentle peace appears. You do not need to understand why time dilates in order to rest. You do not need to visualize curved space in order to be safe. You do not need correct intuition in order to exist. The universe continues to operate according to laws that do not require the consent of human perception. And you, in this quiet night, may allow yourself to do the same, to exist without explanation. Perhaps sleep itself is a kind of suspension of intuition, a moment when the brain stops forcing familiar order onto everything and lets reality, both outer and inner, flow in its own way. And if physics does not care whether you find it reasonable or not, then tonight you do not need to care whether all your thoughts are clear. They may be vague, they may be fragmented, they may remain ununderstood. That is all right. For in a universe that does not privilege intuition, the gentlest act is sometimes to allow oneself not to understand and to drift softly into sleep like a very small grain of dust perfectly placed within the vast night. As Part 3 came to a close with the acknowledgement that physics does not care about our intuition, perhaps a very strange sensation has begun to arise within you, as if the familiar ground of common sense has quietly slipped away, revealing a silent emptiness beneath. Nothing left to firmly grasp, nothing left to assert. And within that emptiness, Something that once seemed obvious since childhood begins to tremble gently: time. If our intuition cannot be trusted on a cosmic scale, then what happens to the thing we have always considered most absolute? What happens to the clocks hanging on our walls, to calendars and dates, to the feeling that it's already late or that everything will eventually pass? Physics answers with a truth that is both subtle and disorienting. Time does not flow the same everywhere. On Earth, time appears to move evenly, rhythmically, without preference. 1 second follows another. One day passes like the day before. But as velocity approaches the speed of light, time slows down. As gravity grows stronger, time slows as well. Near a black hole, time nearly comes to a standstill for a distant observer. A second, there is no longer a second in the way we understand it. This is not a vague hypothesis. It has been measured. Atomic clocks placed on satellites run faster than those on the ground. GPS systems must constantly correct themselves because time in orbit is not the same as time here. The universe does not operate on a single shared clock. And perhaps what unsettles us most is not time dilation itself, but the collapse of the idea of an absolute flow. If there is no single now shared by all, then the boundary between before and after, between what is past and what is yet to come, becomes profoundly blurred. Albert Einstein once offered a simple, haunting remark: the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. If past, present, and future are not as distinct as we feel them to be, then what we call the passage of time may simply be the mind's way of arranging experience so it does not become overwhelming. Time in human perception is not only a physical phenomenon, it is also a psychological structure. Philosophy reached this insight long ago. Henri Bergson distinguished between measured time and lived time. Clock time consists of discrete moments. Conscious time is a continuous flow where memory, emotion, and expectation intertwine. In Time and Free Will, he wrote, "Pure duration is the form which the succession of our conscious states assumes when our ego lets itself live. Some moments stretch endlessly, though they last only minutes. Some years pass in the blink of an eye. This is not a flaw of perception. It is the way the human mind engages with time." And when physics reveals that time itself is uneven across the universe, something remarkable happens. Science and inner experience begin to touch. If physical time can slow down or speed up depending on conditions, then perhaps feeling that time moves differently when we are sad, in love, or exhausted is not something to fix. It is a reflection of a deeper reality where time was never a rigid, straight line. Martin Heidegger saw in this a key to understanding existence. In Being and Time, he wrote, "Time is not a thing which exists, but a manner in which things exist. Time is not an object passing by us. It is the way we are present in the world. When we are anxious, time tightens. When we are at peace, time opens. When we live fully, time seems to disappear. And perhaps this is why humans fear time. We fear it moving too quickly when we have not yet lived. We fear it moving too slowly when we are in pain. We fear tomorrow. We mourn yesterday." But if time is not absolute, then neither must our fear be absolute. Carl Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "We live in time, but time also lives in us. If time lives within us, then the way we treat it is also the way we treat ourselves. When we force ourselves to obey the clock, to be on time, to keep up, we impose mechanical time upon a finite mind. But the universe, by stretching and compressing its own time, seems to whisper something else. There is no single rhythm for all. This brings a very gentle form of healing. For if a second is not the same everywhere in the universe, then feeling slower, more tired, or in need of more time is not a deviation. It is a valid variation. You are not slow. You are simply in a different gravitational field. Night is when we feel this most clearly. As light softens and biological rhythms shift, time seems to loosen. Thoughts no longer line up. Memories drift to the surface. The future recedes. There remains only a hazy presence where breath follows breath. Perhaps sleep is the state in which humans come closest to the way time operates in the universe. No counting. No clear before and after. Only a slow, deep current that needs no explanation. In Confessions, Augustine once confessed a very human paradox. What then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I do not know. We live with time, yet never fully grasp it. And perhaps that is not a flaw, but a gift. For if time were completely clear, completely predictable life would become rigid. It is the ambiguity of time that allows memory to console hope to take root and healing to unfold quietly. As you lie here in this quiet night, there is no need to know what hour the clock shows. No need to know how tomorrow will begin. In this moment, time does not need to flow correctly. It only needs to flow gently. And if somewhere in the universe a single second can stretch into eternity, then here in this small room, you too may allow yourself to remain a little longer within peace. Without hurry, without pressure, without counting. Time will continue in its own way, and you tonight may choose yours. Slow down, soften, and let time like a deep current carry you gently into sleep. As part 4 closed with the idea that time does not flow the same everywhere, perhaps a very fragile feeling has settled within you. As if the familiar clock inside your mind has been gently set aside. No ticking second hand urging you forward, no calendar demanding that you keep up. And within that quiet space, another awareness slowly emerges, not about the rhythm of time, but about the traces time leaves behind. For if time can stretch and contract, if now is not absolute at all, then what is truly reaching us when we look up at the night sky, the answer is gentle yet profound. We are looking into the past. Light from the stars does not arrive instantly. It departs from its source, crosses the cold emptiness of space, and travels for years, thousands of years, even millions of years before reaching our eyes. This means that many of the stars we name those familiar points of light in the sky may no longer exist. They may have collapsed, gone dark, transformed into another state of matter. And yet their light continues its journey. And we in this moment are receiving a delayed greeting. There is something deeply comforting in that thought, because it tells us that disappearance does not always mean an ending, that something which has passed can continue to be present, not in its original form, but through its influence, through its trace, through its light. The universe in its own way is an archive of memory. When we look at the sky, we are not only seeing space, we are seeing time stretched out, layered, overlapping. Each point of light is a story that began long ago, and many of those stories ended where they were born, yet they are still being told quietly here. Philosophy has long recognized the weight of such traces. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "Some people are born posthumously." This line is often understood as fame arriving too late, but in this context it opens another meaning. Presence does not always coincide with the moment of existence. Some things are only seen after they have passed. Some values become clear only after their source has gone dark. Stars that have died yet not disappeared are a perfect illustration of this. They are no longer there in a physical sense, but they are still here in light, in perception, in the stories we tell about the sky. And as we allow ourselves to listen to this, a very human connection emerges. For human beings also live among such lights. There are memories that have left their source moments that no longer exist in the present, yet they continue to shine. There are people who have gone far away, yet their influence remains in the way we speak, the way we love, the way we fall silent. There are older versions of ourselves that have ended, yet their traces are still guiding us. Carl Jung once wrote, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble, not because we lack intelligence, but because they exceed linear solutions. Time, memory, loss. All of them operate like starlight. They do not vanish the moment the source ceases. They radiate. They remain." When we understand that light can exist independently of its source, the fear of disappearance begins to soften. Not because death or endings become lighter, but because we recognize that continuation does not require the original form. The universe does not erase traces. It extends them. Martin Heidegger in Being and Time suggested that human beings do not exist only in the present moment, but always carry what has been and what will be. Time for existence is not a straight line, but a layered structure of experience. Dasein is its past. In this sense, we do not merely live after what is past, we live with it. Stars that have died yet not disappeared remind us that the universe is not in a hurry. It allows influences to complete their journeys. It does not cut off light simply because the source has gone dark. It lets things arrive where they need to arrive. And perhaps this is also a gentle invitation for modern humans, those who often blame themselves for not letting go, yet for not forgetting, for not being finished. Perhaps you do not need to rush every ending. Perhaps the emotions that remain are not signs of weakness, but light still completing its journey. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything that happens is either endurable or not. If it is endurable, then endure it. But endure here does not mean clenching your teeth. It means staying with what is still shining until it naturally settles." Night is when we feel this most clearly. When artificial light softens, the sky opens, and the stars, both living and long gone, appear together. Undistinguished, unexplained, simply a shimmering tapestry of what has existed. And in that moment, time is no longer a thief, it becomes a messenger. You do not need to grasp everything before it passes, for part of it will remain with you within you longer than you expect. Augustine once confessed in Confessions, "The present of things past is memory. The present of things present is sight. The present of things future is expectation. All are present different ways of being here." And when we look at the sky, we stand within a very wide present, where the past is still speaking, the present is listening, and the future does not yet need to arrive. If somewhere in the universe a star may have died long ago while its light continues to travel, then here in this quiet night, you too may allow what has passed to remain a little longer, not to wound, but to be complete. Not every ending needs to be rushed. Not every light goes out the moment its source fades. And as you close your eyes, you may feel yourself surrounded by what has once existed, quiet, undemanding, gentle. Like distant starlight reaching you at the right moment, reminding you that presence does not always coincide with existence. Within this awareness, your breath becomes steadier, thoughts slow down, and sleep like a quiet expanse opens, allowing you to rest among the not yet faded lights of the vast universe. As Part 5 closed with the image of stars that have already died, yet whose light still reaches us, perhaps a deep calm has begun to form within you. As if time is no longer a force that cuts things short, but a current that carries what once existed, slow enough for us to see, to remember to breathe. And as we remain with this feeling long enough, the gaze of the mind begins to travel farther, not only toward stars that have faded, but toward places where light itself cannot return. Here, the story is no longer about memory. It is about boundaries. Black holes are such strange places, not loud, not explosive, not in need of displaying power. They simply exist as deep indentations in the fabric of reality, where space and time, the two familiar pillars of human experience, begin to exchange roles. Near a black hole, what once felt certain becomes fragile. Time slows, stretches, hesitates, as if pausing before each next step. Space curves so deeply that every path leads inward. And at that boundary, the event horizon, the notions of before and after lose their familiar meaning. For a distant observer, everything appears to freeze. For the one falling in, everything continues. There is no single story shared by all. Here, the universe no longer agrees on one unified order. Modern physics describes this as the place where equations begin to fall silent. Not because they are wrong, but because they are no longer sufficient to continue the story. What happens inside a black hole lies beyond our ability to fully describe. Not because we are not intelligent enough, but because the structure of human understanding reaches its own limit. Albert Einstein, who first opened the door to this idea, once said something very simple. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. Black holes are embodiments of that mystery. Not puzzles awaiting solutions, but stopping points of understanding. Places that remind us there are regions of reality not meant for explanation, only for acknowledgement. Philosophy has long sensed the necessity of such stopping points. In Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, Ludwig Wittgenstein ends with a famous line, "Whereof one cannot speak thereof, one must be silent." In this sense, a black hole is a silence of the universe. Not an empty silence, but a dense one, holding too much to be spoken. And perhaps this is why human beings are both drawn to them and unsettled by them. For when we stand before a black hole, we are not only facing a physical phenomenon, we are facing the idea that not everything can be understood, measured, or told. There are experiences both in the universe and in human life where language comes to an end. Carl Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "There are limits beyond which human understanding cannot go." He did not see this as a failure. He saw it as a natural part of the journey of consciousness. For without limits, we would never learn humility before what is greater than us. Black holes teach this lesson without words. Their time is no longer a flow we can stand beside and observe. It becomes a direction like space itself. Moving toward a black hole is not only movement through space, but movement toward a future that cannot be returned from. Not because it is forbidden, but because the structure of reality itself has changed. And if we listen long enough, we begin to notice that this is not entirely unfamiliar. In human life, there are also black holes. Events where time no longer flows as it once did. Moments where before and after cannot be joined by a coherent story. Loss, trauma. Changes so deep that we are no longer who we were and do not yet know who we will become. In such places, advice becomes meaningless. Explanations grow thin. We do not need more light. We need to be allowed to remain safely within the darkness. Martin Heidegger in Being and Time suggested that human beings do not merely exist in the world, but always stand at the edge of unnamed possibilities. Anxiety reveals the nothing, not to frighten us, but to awaken us. For only when we stand before what cannot be spoken do we truly touch our limits and begin to slow down. In this way, a black hole is not only a symbol of destruction, it is a symbol of letting go of control. No light returns, no information is sent back, no hidden story emerges, only the quiet continuation of what lies beyond sight. And perhaps this is also what sleep invites us into each night. As we fall asleep, consciousness withdraws, memory loosens, time loses its clear edges. We no longer know what moment we are in. We enter a region where space and time no longer operate as they do when we are awake, a region that requires no explanation, no alertness, no grasping. In The Varieties of Religious Experience, William James wrote, "Our normal waking consciousness is but one special type of consciousness. Other states are not inferior, they are simply different, and black holes on a cosmic scale remind us that reality too has many such states not to be ranked, but to coexist." Tonight, as you listen to this story, you do not need to understand black holes. You do not need to picture how space bends or how time exchanges roles. What matters more is the feeling the idea carries. Not every boundary needs to be crossed. Some boundaries only need to be respected. You do not need to illuminate every dark corner of the mind. You do not need to tell every story completely. You do not need to know what happens inside. Sometimes healing begins when we allow some things to remain unknown and still feel safe. A black hole does not ask whether we are ready. It simply exists as a quiet truth of the universe. And you in this moment may exist in the same way without explanation, without moving forward, without turning back. Just being here, within steady breath, within gentle darkness. And if somewhere space and time can exchange roles, then here in this quiet night, you too may allow yourself to exchange roles from the one who must understand to the one who is allowed to rest, from the observer to the one held by silence. No light needs to return. No answer needs to emerge. Just allow the night to do its work. And let sleep, like a kindly boundary, close every demand carrying you slowly, deeply, and peacefully within. As Part 6 came to rest at the boundary of the black hole, where space and time exchange roles, where understanding falls silent and letting go becomes a form of safety, perhaps a very particular feeling has arisen within you, no longer overwhelm, no longer sharp curiosity, but a gentle surrender, as if you have accepted that there are forces in the universe far greater than any human effort to control them, and that sometimes the wisest response is simply to allow yourself to drift. And it is precisely in this state, when we stop staring at extreme points like black holes, that our gaze begins to widen towards slow movements, invisible forces, quiet currents so persistent that they carry entire galaxies with them. Not all power shouts, not all movement creates shock. There are immense gravitational forces in the universe, such as the great attractor that cannot be seen directly, do not emit light, have no clear shape, and yet silently pull thousands of galaxies toward them. We do not feel a jolt. We hear no sound. We only know that the entire structure we are part of is moving. Our Milky Way does not stand still. It drifts. and it drifts not by choice but because it lies within a gravitational field larger than itself. Like fish in the ocean, unaware of the currents, we live inside cosmic flows that our senses cannot touch. We wake up, go to work, love, worry, without realizing that the very ground of reality is shifting beneath every one of those moments. The universe is not only vast, it is in motion, and that motion does not require our permission. Philosophy sensed this pull long ago. In Ethics, Baruch Spinoza wrote, "We are not free because we can choose, but because we understand." Spinoza was not claiming that humans control the forces that carry them. He suggested that freedom arises from recognizing that we exist within a web of causes far larger than ourselves, not to fight it, but to stop blaming ourselves for being unable to stand still. The invisible gravitational currents of the universe remind us of something deeply human. Movement is not always a choice. Often, we do not move forward because we want to, but because the entire context is pushing us onward. An era, a family, circumstance, history, things without names. And perhaps much of human exhaustion comes from the unconscious belief that we should have been able to control that direction. The universe does not share this expectation. It allows galaxies to drift along forces they cannot see. It does not demand awareness. It does not ask for consent. It simply operates slowly, deeply, and consistently. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Perhaps these outside events are not only personal circumstances, but larger currents, unseen structures shaping our trajectories. When we stop demanding mastery over everything, another kind of strength appears, the strength of alignment. Cosmic gravitational currents do not create tension. They do not jerk or yank. They pull evenly. And it is precisely this steadiness that is both unsettling and comforting, because it shows that nothing is impulsive, nothing is rushed. Everything is moving according to very long rhythms. Human beings with short lifespans and hurried minds rarely sense these rhythms. We feel only their effects change. Departure. The inability to remain still. Martin Heidegger suggested that humans are always thrown into a world already in motion before we can understand it. In Being and Time, he described this condition as Geworfenheit thrownness. We do not choose where we are born, the era we inhabit, or many of the forces that carry us. We simply wake up mid-current, and if we observe the universe long enough, slowly enough, we begin to see that this is not injustice. It is simply the nature of a reality larger than the individual. The great attractor is not malicious. It does not choose galaxies. It is merely where mass gathers, where gravity becomes strong enough to generate motion. And humans, too, live among invisible great attractors of life, centers of power ideals, fierce collective desires, pulling us along even when we cannot name them. Carl Jung called these forces the collective unconscious. In The Archetypes in the Collective Unconscious, he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Yet Jung did not urge us to fight these forces. He urged us to recognize that we are within the current so that we may stop condemning ourselves for being carried. And perhaps the deepest healing in this realization is this: you do not need to be still in order to be at peace. Fish do not need to stop swimming for the ocean to be safe. Galaxies do not need to stop drifting in order to exist. And you do not need to control every direction in order to rest. Night is when we feel this most clearly, when the body stops bracing, when the will releases the helm, when we allow ourselves to lie within the current instead of swimming against it. Breath finds its own rhythm. Thoughts settle on their own. And we realize that we have always been held without knowing it. William James once wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "Be not afraid of life. Believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create the fact." But perhaps before believing that life is worth living, all we need is to trust that we are not alone in this movement, that there are forces larger than us carrying us forward, and that our task is not to resist them, but to soften within them. If entire galaxies can drift through the universe without sensing every pull, then tonight you too may allow your thoughts to pass without clinging to each one. You do not need to know where you are going. You do not need to name the current. You only need to let the body grow heavy, the breath slow, and the mind stop asking. The invisible currents will continue doing their work, and you in this moment may do something very small, yet deeply human rest. within the flow, and trust that even unseen there are forces holding you gently to life, soft enough for you to drift into sleep like a small galaxy moving in its own true rhythm through the wide night. As Part 7 closed with the image of invisible gravitational currents carrying entire galaxies through the universe, perhaps a very gentle feeling has settled within you, no longer the effort of swimming against the flow, no longer the anxiety of having to control direction, just a soft release, as if you have accepted that movement is the ground of all things, and that your task is not to stand still, but to remain with the movement itself. And from that release, another awareness begins to appear closer. More intimate, the earth is not still, and neither are we. We often feel as though we are motionless, lying on the bed, sitting quietly in a dark room, breath steady, body unmoving. Yet this feeling is only true within a very narrow frame. In reality, the earth is spinning on its axis at thousands of kilometers per hour. It is rushing around the sun. The sun is drifting through the Milky Way, and the entire galaxy is being pulled along by immense gravitational currents. Even when you are lying still, you are moving. We move without feeling wind against our faces, without hearing any sound, without fastening a seatbelt, because this movement is not abrupt. It is steady deep and has been happening for a very long time. The sensation of stillness is merely an agreement between our senses and our surroundings. The universe does not recognize stillness, it recognizes only relativity. At first, this may feel unsettling. If everything is in motion, if there is no absolute fixed point, then where do we hold on? But if we stay with this idea long enough, a different kind of comfort emerges. For if movement is the foundation of reality, then feeling not yet settled, not finished, not there yet, is not a personal failure. It is simply the nature of things. Albert Einstein once wrote a very brief, very gentle line: "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." Balance is not maintained by standing still, but by continuing without rushing, without forcing, just enough not to fall. The earth keeps its balance in this way. It spins, yet does not collapse. It drifts, yet does not dissolve. And we living upon its surface absorb this lesson quietly. Philosophy has long spoken of the illusion of stillness. More than 2,000 years ago, Heraclitus said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice," not only because the river changes, but because we ourselves are never the same when we believe we are standing still. Even when we do nothing, we are changing within ourselves, within memory, within the way we feel. Martin Heidegger described human existence as a becoming. In Being and Time, he suggested that we are not finished objects, but open processes always in between. Dasein is in each case its possibility. If this is so, then the unease of not having arrived is not a sign of being lost. It is a sign of being alive. At night, the time we imagine to be the most still is when movement runs deepest. The body rests yet, the brain reorganizes memory. The nervous system shifts modes. Biological rhythms recalibrate. What we cannot control begins to do its work. Stillness on the surface turns out to be a powerful form of inner motion. Carl Jung once wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "The unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good. The movements we do not see, the inner currents, are not threats, they are foundations. Like the motion of the earth itself, imperceptible to us, yet if it were to stop, everything would collapse." Perhaps much of human tension comes from a mistaken desire, the wish to be completely still, to reach a final point, to arrive at a state of done. But the universe does not work that way. It offers no final harbor in the present moment. It offers rhythms instead, long and short, fast and slow, for us to learn how to listen. Marcus Aurelius, who understood the impermanence of power and life, deeply wrote in Meditations, "Do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others. Be present. To be present is not to freeze. It is to stay with the movement that is already happening rather than resisting it with impossible demands. If the earth can spin for billions of years without urgency, then tonight you do not need to hurry either. You do not need to go anywhere in your sleep. You only need to allow yourself to be carried by the rhythm of breath, by the pulse of the heart, by the slow movement of a body returning to balance." William James once wrote, "In the varieties of religious experience, the greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitudes." Perhaps the gentlest attitude you can choose right now is to stop demanding stillness. Instead, allow that even in rest, you are moving in a way that is safe, supported, and effortless. You do not need to hold everything fixed in order to feel at peace. You do not need to stop completely in order to rest. You only need to remain with a movement slow enough not to exhaust you. The night continues to drift. The earth continues to turn. The galaxy continues to move. And you, small human, are being carried along with all of it without needing to do anything more. Let the body grow heavy. Let thoughts dissolve. Let the feeling of stillness remain only as a gentle illusion shielding you from the noise of true velocity. For even as you lie unmoving, the universe is still carrying you through the night, through sleep, through another rhythm of existence. And within that movement, nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be understood. There is only one simple truth: you are exactly where you belong within the unceasing flow of everything. And that by itself is enough for you to close your eyes and trust, allowing sleep to arrive light as a slow turning, holding you gently within the wide night. As Part 8 closed with the sense that the earth is never truly still, that even in our most motionless moments, the entire universe is carrying us along. Perhaps a very deep relaxation has settled within you. No longer a need to arrive anywhere. No longer the pressure to anchor yourself to a fixed point. And within that release, another question, very gentle, very human, quietly emerges. Are the things we call normal truly universal? We are accustomed to days with sunrise and sunset, to years divided into 4 seasons, to time broken into neat repeating units. These habits sink so deeply into us that we rarely question them. But once again, the universe does not share this familiarity. There are planets where a single day lasts longer than an entire year, where the sun rises painfully slowly and takes an equally long time to set, where one rotation on its axis exceeds a full orbit around its star. To human intuition, this sounds like a paradox. To physics, it is simply another configuration, another rhythm of motion. And here a very gentle lesson begins to unfold. These planetary paradoxes are not meant to overwhelm us. They do not exist to challenge intelligence. They quietly remind us that normal is not a universal standard. It is only a local agreement between human beings and the very specific conditions of life on Earth. On Earth, day and year exist in a kind of harmony, but that harmony is not a cosmic law. Elsewhere, it dissolves, and the universe does not judge it as wrong. It simply recognizes it as different. Philosophy has long questioned the tyranny of the normal. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in The Gay Science, "What is now called common sense was once called heresy." What feels natural today is often just the result of prolonged familiarity, not truth, not an absolute norm, simply something we have lived with long enough to stop questioning. Planets whose days outlast their years act like a gentle tap on that habit. They do not break reality, they widen it. And as reality widens, the pressure to be like everyone else begins to soften. For if the universe allows worlds where time itself defies intuition, why are we so strict with human lives that move at different rhythms? There are people who need a long time to begin the day. There are people who live an entire lifetime within a single emotional season. There are people whose inner phases last longer than any social cycle, and none of this makes them wrong. Carl Jung wrote in Psychological Types, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." The universe seems to agree. It offers no single formula for all planets. It allows each world to turn according to its own rhythm without asking permission from the others. When we contemplate these planetary paradoxes, a quiet healing takes place. We begin to question the belief that we must always be on time, that we must progress according to a fixed schedule, that there is only one rhythm considered healthy. But if a day can last longer than a year, who has the authority to decide which rhythm is correct? Henri Bergson, who devoted his life to thinking about time, wrote in Creative Evolution, "Time is invention, or it is nothing at all. Time is not only something we measure, it is something we live. And the way we live time reveals more than any clock ever could. Seen this way, the exhaustion of modern life, the feeling of always lagging behind, always out of sync, takes on a different meaning. It is no longer a personal failure. it becomes a mismatch between human beings and social standards that are themselves only temporary agreements. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself in Meditations, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years." He was not urging haste. He was reminding himself to live according to his own rhythm because there is no guarantee that another person's rhythm will ever suit us. Planets with days longer than years are not in a hurry. They need no clocks. They simply turn according to what their structure allows. And perhaps human beings need to relearn this simplicity. Not to give up, but to stop bending themselves to fit rhythms never meant for them. Night is when we feel this most clearly. When society pauses. When schedules fall silent. When daytime standards retreat. In the night, each person can return to their own rhythm, slower, deeper, and less judged. William James wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "The deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated." Perhaps what we truly crave is not permission to move faster, but permission to move more slowly without being seen as wrong. If the universe allows worlds where dawn can last for months, then here in this quiet room, you too may allow yourself to extend the moment of rest. There is no need to rush into sleep, no need to force relaxation. Simply remain with the rhythm that is already here. You do not need to be normal in order to be at peace. You do not need to resemble anyone else in order to rest. You only need to be faithful to your own inner cycle. The universe does not grade planets by how fast they spin. It does not compare the day of one world to the year of another. It simply allows each to exist in its own configuration. And if the universe can be that generous, then tonight you can be generous with yourself. Let your breath find its own rhythm. Let thoughts dissolve at their own pace. Let sleep arrive not as a command, but as a very slow sunrise, no schedule, no standard, only gentleness. For in a universe where a day can be longer than a year, there is nothing wrong with needing more time to feel at ease. And within that time, you are not falling behind. You are simply moving along your own orbit, deeply human, deeply real, and fully deserving of respect. As Part 9 closed with the idea that normal is only a very narrow agreement between human beings and their living environment, perhaps an even deeper loosening has begun to take place within you. There is no longer a need to compare rhythms, no pressure to spin at the correct speed. And within this loosening, another question, quieter yet wider, slowly opens. If all rhythms are relative, then where is the boundary between us and the universe? The answer arrives very slowly. And when it comes, it does not take the form of an abstract idea, but the form of your own body. The atoms that make you carbon in your bones, oxygen in your lungs, iron in your blood were not born on Earth. They were forged inside massive stars where pressure and temperature were great enough to create heavy elements. And when those stars ended their lives in violent explosions, their matter was scattered into space, drifting for millions of years, gathering again as dust clouds, planets, life, and finally becoming you. In a very precise sense, the matter of dead stars is flowing through the human body. We often say that we live in the universe, but the truth goes deeper than that. We are the universe experiencing itself through a form that is temporary, fragile, yet sufficient to feel. Carl Sagan expressed this with a line that has become iconic in Cosmos. We are made of star stuff. He did not say this as poetry. He said it as a scientist, someone who understood that there is no hard boundary between human beings and the universe. At most, there are different stages of the same material process. Seen this way, the feeling of strangeness begins to dissolve. The universe is no longer a cold place outside us, something we observe from a distance. It is the deep history of our own bodies. Each cell carries a cosmic history billions of years long. Not memory in the psychological sense, but memory in the material sense. Philosophy, even without telescopes, sensed this interconnection long ago. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "All things are interwoven, and the bond between them is sacred. For him there was no separate self standing apart from the world, only different expressions of the same natural order. When we forget this, we feel alone. When we remember it, loneliness begins to soften. Perhaps part of modern emptiness comes from believing that we were thrown into a foreign, indifferent universe. But when we understand that our bodies were born from ancient stellar explosions, that feeling transforms. We are no longer outsiders. We are continuations." Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. All joy wants eternity. For Nietzsche, joy is not a detached moment, but a merging with something larger than oneself. And perhaps recognizing the stellar origin of our bodies brings a very quiet kind of joy, the joy of belonging. You did not emerge from nothing. You do not exist randomly without ground. You are the result of a chain of transformation so long the mind can barely imagine it. Yet your body carries it every second. Carl Jung, always searching for the connection between individual psychology and larger order, wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul. The individual is not just a small version of the universe, but the universe itself in concentrated form. This does not mean that we are grand. It means that we are connected. When we ache, it is not an isolated personal failure. When we feel exhausted, it is not a system error. It is a natural response of matter passing through a temporary form of life. And here, a quiet healing takes place. For if our bodies are products of cosmic processes, then their fatigue, their need for rest, their need to be cared for is not weakness. It is the honesty of matter. Even stars have cycles. They are born, they burn, and they die. No one calls that a failure. In Being and Time, Martin Heidegger emphasized that human beings are finite, carrying death within the very structure of existence. He did not say this to frighten us, but to remind us that finitude gives weight to every moment. Being toward death is the key to authentic existence. Yet when seen through a cosmic lens, death is no longer an absolute ending. Matter does not disappear. It changes form. Just as stars died to create the atoms in you, your body will one day return to a larger cycle. And if you stay with this long enough, it is not frightening. It is gentle, because it tells you that you do not need to hold on to everything tightly. You do not need to cling to your current form as if it were the only thing of value. Your worth is not in lasting forever, but in fully participating in the moment that is here. William James wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "The greatest use of a life is to spend it for something that will outlast it." Perhaps what outlasts us is not fame or achievement, but the continuation of matter and influence like starlight, like atoms carrying on their journey after the original form has changed. Tonight, as you lie still and feel the rise and fall of your breath, remember that each breath is a cosmic exchange. Oxygen enters, carbon dioxide leaves, a small cycle reflecting a much greater one. You do not need to rationalize your existence. You do not need to prove your meaning. Your existence was written into the matter of the universe long ago, and with that understanding, an invisible burden falls away. You no longer need to carry the universe on your shoulders, for in a very real sense, the universe is carrying you. Let the body grow heavy. Let thoughts dissolve. Let the ancient atoms within you do what they have done for billions of years, return toward balance. In this moment, sleep is not a retreat from the world. It is a gesture of cooperation with the universe, allowing matter to rest so that tomorrow, in a very small, very human form, the universe may continue to experience itself through you. As Part 10 closed with the feeling that the human body is a continuation of ancient stellar explosions, perhaps a very gentle dissolving has begun within you. The boundary between self and universe softens not as an idea, but as something you can feel in the truth of your own breathing. And as that boundary dissolves, another awareness quietly opens. Infinity is not only far away, it is also here. We often imagine infinity as unreachable distance, billions of galaxies, light years stretching so far the mind finally lets go. But there is a gentle paradox. In a single glass of water on a table, there are more molecules than there are stars in the entire observable universe. Not because the glass is large, but because the small contains a richness that exceeds intuition. The universe does not reveal its vastness only through size. It whispers of infinity through density. Every drop of water is a crowd of motion. Every cell is a city of reactions. Every breath is a delicate chain of exchanges that, if interrupted, would cause life to quietly withdraw. When we look closely enough, the small is not simple at all. It opens like another sky, turning the direction of wonder upside down. Philosophy has long suspected the tyranny of scale. Blaise Pascal wrote in Pensées Man is equally incapable of seeing the nothingness from which he emerges and the infinity in which he is engulfed. Pascal was not saying that human beings are trapped between two abysses in order to despair. He was reminding us that infinity has two doors. One opens outward and one opens inward. We are used to looking outward, But the inward door where infinity hides inside the small is often overlooked. When we lean closer, the world does not shrink, it multiplies. Quantity, structure, rhythm, everything thickens. The universe, as if playing a fair game, compensates. What is lost in distance is returned in detail. What is lost in breadth is repaid in depth. Carl Jung touched this depth when he wrote in Psychology and Alchemy. The small world of the psyche has its own infinity. He was not saying the mind replaces the universe. He was saying that infinity can dwell within limits. A dream, a memory, a symbol, when looked at closely enough, unfolds layers of meaning no less vast than a field of stars. Perhaps it is because we fail to notice this that we so often feel lacking. We go searching for infinity in far places while not seeing it in what we hold each day. We imagine meaning must live somewhere beyond reach, while it is whispering from the smallest details of life. A glass of water, a single breath, a moment of silence. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself with a simple line, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good. Within is not withdrawal. It is entering the depth of what is already here. And when we do, what is here suddenly becomes wide enough to hold us." Science, as it enters the microscopic world, confirms this intuition. The quantum realm is not small in the sense of being poor. It is dense with possibilities. Probability layered upon probability. States entangled with states. Their simplicity is often only an illusion created by distance. When we come close, everything becomes subtly complex, like a piece of music so quiet, yet made of many voices. The philosopher Baruch Spinoza sensed this unity long ago. In Ethics, he wrote, "Whatever is in God, and nothing can be or be conceived without God." Whether we read God religiously or as nature itself, the statement points to something essential. Nothing is a detached fragment. The small is not excluded from the large order. It is another expression of the same reality. When we understand this, the fear of being too small begins to soften. For small does not mean meaningless. Small is simply another way of containing much. And if infinity can dwell in a glass of water, then it can dwell within an ordinary human life as well. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "One must have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Here, chaos is not disorder. It is inner thickness, the richness from which creation becomes possible. A life that does not seek to impress can still carry a sky within. Night is when we touch this most clearly. As light fades, the surface world retreats. Small things begin to speak the sound of wind, the pulse of the heart, the warmth of a blanket. These details are not trivial. They are gateways into depth where infinity needs no proof. William James wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "The greatest things are often the most silent. Perhaps infinity is like that too. It is not loud. It does not demand. It waits to be seen up close. And when we look closely enough, a quiet healing takes place. We stop searching for greatness in distant places. We stop measuring our lives against loud standards. We learn to place a hand upon what is already here and realize it is deep enough. You do not need a new sky to feel spacious. You do not need a different life to feel full. You only need to stay with what is small, long enough for infinity to open." In Confessions, Augustine wrote something strangely intimate. "You were within me, and I was outside myself." Perhaps much of our exhaustion comes from always being outside chasing distance, numbers, noise. When we turn inward not to close off, but to go deeper, we return to a space that does not need to expand any further. Tonight, if you place a glass of water beside your bed, let it be a gentle reminder not of science, but of seeing. That infinity does not require a long journey. It requires a kindly attention. Let the breath sink more slowly. Let thoughts grow thinner. Let the small lead you into its depth. For in a universe where infinity can dwell in a glass of water, you do not need to become bigger to be enough. You only need to be still so you can see that right now, right here, depth is already open, gently carrying you towards sleep. As part 11 came to a close with the feeling that infinity can dwell in the smallest things in a glass of water, a breath, a quiet moment, perhaps a natural calm has begun to settle within you. When we no longer have to cast our gaze far away to find depth, another question, slower and softer, begins to form. If infinity is already here, does it have to come carrying meaning? The universe, when watched long enough, seems to answer with its own silence. It creates stars, planets, and even life, yet leaves no explanation behind. No purpose is carved into the sky. No message is attached to each stellar explosion. Complex structures arise from simple laws repeating and repeating without a why waiting out in front. The universe creates but does not require meaning. This often confuses us because we are creatures who live by stories. We need purpose in order to continue, reasons in order to endure, meaning in order not to feel lost. When we cannot find meaning out there, we easily conclude that the universe is cold and different. But perhaps that is only a very human misunderstanding. We assign the universe a task that never belonged to it. Albert Camus called this gap the absurd, the collision between the human hunger for meaning and the world's silence. In The Myth of Sisyphus, he wrote, "The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world." Camus did not treat that silence as a cruel refusal. He treated it as a truth that must be faced. The universe does not promise, it does not reassure, it does not explain. And precisely because of this, human beings are free to do what the universe does not: create meaning. Meaning in this sense is not a discovery, but a creation. Not something we find in the stars, but something we place into our experience. When we confuse these two, we become exhausted. When we distinguish them, an invisible burden falls away. Friedrich Nietzsche reached toward this point early on. In The Gay Science, he wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Nietzsche was not saying that this why is bestowed by the universe. He was saying it is made, and when made honestly, it can hold us up. The universe does not need meaning in order to operate, but human beings need meaning in order to remain with that operation. When we accept that meaning is not a property of the universe, something gentle happens. We stop demanding that the universe answer for us. We stop feeling betrayed when events do not have a reason. We stop blaming ourselves when life fails to match some grand script. For if there is no shared script, then writing small lines of our own is no longer rebellion. It becomes a creative instinct. Carl Jung, looking deeply into the human psyche, recognized that the need for meaning is not arrogance, but a survival function. In Man and His Symbols, he wrote, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life." Yet Jung also understood that meaning does not arrive from outside as a command. It emerges from the relationship between human beings and experience, from how we connect, from the symbols we choose, from the values we cultivate. The universe does not provide meaning, but it provides space in which meaning can be made. And perhaps that space is the greatest gift. When the universe does not impose purpose, we are not forced into a role. We do not have to live in service of some vast design. We can live to care, to learn, to love, to rest without proving that these things serve a supreme plan. Meaning becomes small enough to reach, and therefore real enough to nourish. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius, living amid war and power, wrote with calm simplicity, "Do what is in front of you." He did not demand that we find meaning at the edge of the cosmos. He advised attending to what is before us with kindness and integrity. Meaning, if it comes, will appear in the way we are present, not in distant promises. At night, this becomes easier to understand. Because the night does not demand purpose, it does not justify its existence. It simply arrives, and in its arrival, many things are allowed to soften. We do not need to be right. We do not need to achieve. We only need to be. William James wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "The greatest things are often the most silent," meaning when it is not forced, becomes silent in that same way. It does not shout. It needs no slogans. It lives in very small gestures, a deep breath, forgiveness that is just enough, the decision to rest when the body speaks. And if the universe creates without needing meaning, then human beings can also live without one total meaning that covers everything. We can allow meaning to appear in short segments, then dissolve like points of light in the night sky. Beautiful even without being connected into constellations, in being a nothingness. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Existence precedes essence." We exist first and only then define who we are. There is no preset nature, no rigid meaning we must obey. There is a freedom fragile yet real. We are allowed to place meaning where it helps us live. Seen this way, the worry, does my life have meaning, begins to soften, because it no longer needs one universal answer. It needs small answers that fit our rhythm, changing over time. And that is entirely all right. Tonight, as you listen to stories of a universe that carries no built-in message, let yourself grow lighter. You do not need to decode existence. You do not need to find the final reason. If there is one thing enough for this moment, it is rest. Meaning can wait until tomorrow, or another day, or until it naturally appears in something very small. The universe will continue creating without explanation, and you tonight may allow yourself to live without carrying a complete meaning on your shoulders. Let the breath slow. Let thoughts settle. Let sleep arrive like a gentle agreement between you and the silence of the world. For in a universe that does not need meaning in order to exist, peace does not come from understanding everything, but from allowing yourself to be here long enough, light enough, that tomorrow, if you need to, you will create meaning again in your own quiet way. As part 12 came to a close with the acceptance that the universe creates without needing meaning, perhaps a very quiet emptiness has opened within you. No questions left to answer, no need to assign messages to everything. And within that emptiness, another realization slowly takes shape. If the universe does not need meaning, then it also does not need morality. The cosmos operates without concern for life, without favor, without hostility, without distinction. Collisions between celestial bodies do not happen out of malice. Bursts of radiation that strip planets bare are not punishments. Destructive events on a cosmic scale, from supernovae to gamma-ray bursts, are simply natural consequences of physical laws. They carry no good or evil. They simply occur. For human beings, this can feel unsettling. We are used to seeing the world through a moral lens. We ask, why do bad things happen? Why must life suffer? But the universe does not answer in this way, because it never asked these questions to begin with. Spinoza wrote in Ethics, "Nature has no particular goal in view, and final causes are nothing but human fictions. Nature has no moral objective, and when we project our ethics onto it, we are not wrong, but we are not describing the universe either. We are describing our own psychological needs. The cold randomness of the cosmos is not cruelty. It is absolute impartiality. The universe does not oppose life, but it does not protect it either. Life exists within very narrow gaps of physical conditions, like a flower growing from a crack in stone, not favored yet still blooming." Albert Camus saw in this not despair, but clarity. In The Myth of Sisyphus, he wrote, "The universe is neither reasonable nor unreasonable. It is simply there." This truth, when faced directly, can feel overwhelming. But if we remain with it long enough, something else begins to happen. The burden of having to justify every form of suffering starts to fall away, not because suffering is no longer real, but because it no longer needs a cosmic reason to be acknowledged. We often ask, why did this happen to me? But the universe does not distribute events according to merit or morality. It does not choose. It does not aim. It does not remember. This randomness is not a personal insult. It is the shared context. Marcus Aurelius, who lived through plague and war, understood this deeply. In Meditations, he wrote, "Whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time." He did not say this to encourage resignation. He said it to free us from the illusion that every event carries a message directed at the self. Not everything that happens is about you. Many things simply arrive because it is their turn to arrive. When we stop personalizing the randomness of the universe, a quiet healing takes place. We no longer need to ask what we did wrong to deserve what happened. We no longer need to extract a lesson from every wound. We can allow pain to exist without demanding justification. Carl Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "Life has no obligation to give us what we expect." This statement is not cold, it is honest. And honesty, though initially uncomfortable, can bring a deep peace. Because when we stop expecting the universe to be fair in human terms, we can begin to build our own fairness in how we treat one another, in how we care for what is fragile. The randomness of the cosmos carries neither good nor evil, but human beings have the capacity to choose. It is precisely within an impartial universe that human morality becomes meaningful. Not because it is endorsed by the stars, but because it is a deeply human response to indifference. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, one must learn to love, not because the world is easy to love, but because without love, randomness becomes unbearable. To love in this sense is not to romanticize the universe, but to create warmth within a cold reality. When we understand that the universe does not care about life, we also understand that all care comes from human beings. And this makes every act of kindness more precious, not less, because it is not guaranteed, it is chosen. Night is when we feel this impartiality most clearly. The sky does not change with our emotions. The stars do not shine brighter when we are sad, nor dim when we are joyful. Yet within that silence, we can choose how to respond by being gentle with ourselves. William James wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "The greatest things are those which give us strength to live. Perhaps in a cold and random cosmos, what gives us strength is not the belief that everything has a reason, but the belief that we can care for one another even when there is no reason. You do not need to understand why everything happened the way it did. You do not need to find meaning in every loss. You do not need to believe that the universe cares in order to be cared for. Tonight, allow randomness to remain where it belongs out there in distant spaces. And keep for yourself a small, very human space where kindness does not need to be justified by laws. Let the breath slow. Let thoughts loosen their grip. Let sleep arrive as a temporary agreement with reality. Not everything has meaning, but peace can be created. In a universe without good or evil, choosing to rest, choosing to be gentle with yourself, is not avoidance. It is a courageous act, a choice to continue living more lightly, more deeply, and awake enough that tomorrow, if needed, you may once again create a little warmth within the vast indifference of the cosmos." As Part 13 came to a close with the recognition that the universe operates within a cold randomness, neither good nor evil, neither favoring nor opposing. Perhaps a very deep stillness has settled within you, not emptiness, but the calm that arrives when we stop asking the universe to explain itself. And within that stillness, something fragile yet unmistakably clear begins to appear. Even if the universe does not care, human beings still can. Measured against the scale of the cosmos, a human being is truly only a speck of dust, a tiny point drifting through a vastness so immense that all numbers lose their meaning. Our lifespan is a blink compared to the age of stars. The space we occupy is negligible beside the voids between galaxies. Judged only by size and time, humanity carries almost no weight at all. But this speck of dust knows how to ask questions. It knows how to lift its gaze toward the sky and wonder who it is. It knows how to feel the silence of the universe and not turn away. It can reflect doubt, listen to the faint tremors of consciousness itself. And it is precisely this capacity, not strength, not endurance, that makes smallness become something rare. Carl Sagan once wrote in Pale Blue Dot, "The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena." Yet he did not stop there. He went on to speak of the moral responsibility that arises from recognizing our smallness. For when we know we are small, we lose arrogance. When we know we are fragile, we learn to be gentler with one another and with ourselves. Consciousness does not make human beings the center of the universe. It simply makes us witnesses. Temporary witnesses, but sufficient to perceive beauty, sufficient to feel pain, sufficient to love. And perhaps that alone is already something extraordinary. Philosophy has never treated consciousness as an obvious gift. It has always been a mystery. In Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel wrote, "Self-consciousness exists in and for itself. Consciousness does not merely know the world, it knows that it knows." That subtle loop of reflection creates a depth that cannot be measured by size. A conscious speck of dust is no longer merely dust. It becomes a point of view through which the universe can be felt. Yet this gift carries a burden as well, for consciousness makes us aware of our finitude. We know we will end. We know moments pass. We know what we love can be lost. And this knowing at times exhausts us. Martin Heidegger described the human being as a being toward death and an existence that carries death within its very structure. But he did not say this to inspire fear. He said it to show that awareness of finitude is what makes presence authentic. Only being toward death makes it possible for Dasein to be whole. A speck of dust that does not know it is dust does not suffer, but it also does not love. Human beings suffer because they know, and they love because they know. Consciousness, in this sense, is a double-edged blade, yet it is the only blade that opens depth of experience. Friedrich Nietzsche, often misunderstood as celebrating brute strength, wrote repeatedly about fragility. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. This chaos is not violence. It is inner richness, the ability to endure contradiction, to carry unanswered questions and still continue living." A conscious speck of dust does not need to conquer the universe. It only needs not to turn away from uncertainty. Seen this way, smallness is no longer an accusation. It becomes context. And within that context, every act of kindness, every moment of presence, every well-timed rest gains value. Not because it is recorded somewhere in the cosmos, but because it is felt here. Marcus Aurelius, who understood the fragility of both power and flesh, wrote in Meditations Waste, "No more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He did not seek cosmic greatness. He sought human integrity. For in a world this vast, what we can do is not to grow infinitely large, but to live fully within our smallness. Night is when this becomes most apparent. When lights dim, when noise recedes, when the sky opens, we look up and see how small we are. Yet instead of fear, we may feel held. For this smallness is not isolation. It is belonging to something far larger. William James wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "The deepest problems of human nature are religious. Religious here need not mean belief. It points to a sense of relation between the finite and what exceeds it. And consciousness, the capacity to feel that relation, is where healing begins. You do not need to become great to be valuable. You do not need to leave a mark on the universe to be complete. You only need to be present with what is with what you feel. A conscious speck of dust does not need to prove anything. It only needs to keep asking, keep looking, keep breathing. And in each of these very small acts, the universe, though indifferent, is still reflected through a singular point of view. Tonight, as you close your eyes, allow yourself to become small. Not to disappear, but to grow lighter. To stop straining against measures never meant for human beings. To remain with the gentle awareness that you are alive, fragile, finite, yet real. Let the breath sink slowly. Let thoughts soften. Let consciousness, the most fragile gift of all, rest within itself. For in a vast and impartial universe, a speck of dust that can feel is already miracle enough. And tonight, that miracle does not need to do anything more than drift into sleep, peaceful like a very small yet deeply real point of light within the boundless night. As part 14 closed with the image of the human being as a conscious speck of dust, small, fragile, yet able to see, to question, to feel, perhaps a very unusual quiet has settled within you. Not pride at being special, not sadness at being small, but something in between, the feeling of being present without needing to exaggerate oneself. And it is precisely in this state that the journey naturally moves toward its end, not with an answer, but with a gently opening door, humility. From the beginning until now, we have passed through many layers of the universe, laws that do not care about intuition, worlds not meant for life, time that bends, space that drifts, invisible gravitational currents, planetary paradoxes, stars long dead whose light still arrives, and finally the human being, small yet reflective, standing among all of it, trying to understand. But perhaps this is where we need to pause. Not because there is nothing left to learn, but because not all peace comes from knowing more. There is a common illusion of the modern mind that if we understand deeply enough, clearly enough, completely enough, we will no longer feel anxious. That knowledge is the path to safety. Yet the universe, through each chapter we have just crossed, has quietly pointed to something else. Understanding has limits, and those limits are not a failure. Socrates, often regarded as the starting point of Western philosophy, once said something very brief yet very heavy: "I know that I know nothing." This was not a rejection of knowledge, it was a declaration of humility. The moment we accept that we cannot know everything, a subtle tension in the mind begins to dissolve. We stop bracing ourselves against reality. We stop forcing the world to fit our frameworks of understanding. In Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, Ludwig Wittgenstein ends with a famous line, "Whereof one cannot speak thereof, one must be silent." Not because such things do not exist, but because there are layers of reality that do not need explanation in order to have value. Silence in this sense is not avoidance. It is a form of respect. The universe does not require us to understand it. It does not grade human cognition. It does not reward those who get it right. All pressure to understand, to grasp, comes from within us. And when that pressure is set down, what remains is not emptiness, but lightness. Martin Heidegger wrote in Being and Time, "Not all that is essential can be grasped. Not everything essential can be held. Some things can only be stayed with, like life, like death, like consciousness, like this very moment in which you are lying here, listening, breathing, existing, without needing to name it. Humility, in its deepest sense, is not thinking less of oneself than is true. It is stepping out of the center of the universe's questions. It is no longer believing that everything must be explained to us. And in doing so, we do not lose our value. We rediscover our proper place, a place small enough to be free of pressure, yet real enough to feel." Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this many times in meditations. Accept the things to which fate binds you. Not surrender, but assent. Assent to what cannot be controlled. Assent to the limits of intelligence. Assent to the fact that not every question needs an answer in order for life to continue. In a world that constantly urges us to know, to understand, to have an opinion, humility becomes a healing act. It allows rest. It allows the mind to loosen. It allows ambiguity to exist without being treated as a threat. Carl Jung wrote in Psychology and Religion, "The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. The mind moves between meaning and meaninglessness, between understanding and not understanding. This is a natural motion. When we stop trying to hold it fixed at one end, tension fades. We do not have to stand entirely on the side of knowledge. We can remain in the middle. Perhaps the true end of this journey is not that you understand more about the universe, but that you no longer have to carry the universe on your shoulders. That you no longer have to ask whether you understand enough. That you no longer force the mind to stay alert until exhaustion." William James wrote in The Varieties of Religious Experience, "Wisdom lies in knowing what to overlook. Knowing what to let go of, this is a rare form of wisdom. And here what we may overlook is the need to understand everything in order to be at peace. You do not need to understand everything to be at peace. You do not need to explain your existence in order to rest. You do not need to name the universe in order to belong to it. When understanding closes, darkness does not open. Humility does. A space wide enough for the mind to stop tightening. A space where questions are allowed to settle, where silence is no longer frightening. Night is the most natural time for this. Night does not demand alertness. It does not ask you to explain why today unfolded as it did. It simply invites you to set the body down, set the thoughts down, and allow what is larger than you to continue its motion. The universe will keep turning. Time will keep flowing. The great questions will remain. You do not need to carry them into sleep. Let understanding stop here, not as defeat, but as rest. Let humility open like a thin blanket laid gently over a tired mind. Let yourself be a conscious speck of dust, needing to know nothing more in this moment. Breath slows. Thoughts thin out. And silence, not as emptiness, but as a temporary home for the mind. You do not need to understand the universe to be at peace within it. Tonight, simply be here and allow sleep to come as the most natural act of all existence when striving to understand falls away and letting go begins. And now, as this long journey gently comes to a close, as the questions about the universe, about meaning, about life and smallness are quietly set down like stars fading beyond the horizon, allow your mind to rest. You do not need to carry knowledge with you. No need to remember arguments. No need to hold on to any answers. The stories you have just heard did not come to make you understand more, but to make you lighter. The universe we have just passed through is not a problem in need of a solution, but a space wide enough for human beings to be allowed not to know, to be allowed not to be certain, and still be at peace. Perhaps the most comforting thing about the universe is not whether it is ordered or chaotic, but this: it does not require you to understand it in order to exist within it. You have traveled very far tonight, far beyond the movements of ordinary thought, far beyond the need to control, to explain, to name everything. And now, as your breathing has slowed, as your body has found its quiet resting place, allow sleep to arrive not as an escape, but as a gentle agreement with existence. The universe will continue to move on quietly, impartially vast. And you in this moment need only do one very small thing, one very human thing: rest. I wish you a deep sleep. And if anything remains after tonight, let it be only a soft, indistinct sense of peace. Nothing to understand, nothing to hold, only something to be within.